Welcome to the Decode podcast. This is Rev 1.11. My name is Daniel Stanfill from Aurora Boardworks. Elias, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Elias Malfavon with Metal Etch Services.
And I'm Sean Kincaid with KNF Electronics.
And our guest this week is Jordan Danko. He is the founder/owner at FC Design Services. He is offering electrical engineering and PCB design. Hails from Ohio. We have that he is a follower of Christ and recently placed an order with Sean. So he obviously has a lot of belief in a higher power. So, you guys, you want to just, Jordan, if you don't mind giving us the start of we usually like to just start on background stuff, like how you kind of got into the industry, how long you've been doing it, maybe what led you to start FC Design Services. If you don't mind starting there.
Yeah, sure. So, how I got into it. I'll try and go down the list, right? So, I was in high school and I grew up, my dad was an electrical engineer, and I was in high school and looking ahead at college, and I didn't want to be like my dad. And so I said, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. Well, I got to school and I was in a statics class and a circuits class at the same time, and I hated my statics class and I loved my circuits class, and I said, what the heck? Why am I doing this? And my dad and I, ended up as an electrical engineer. So, bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering, and love it. It's awesome. It's super fun. I love what I do. So, that was your first question. What was your second question, Daniel? I don't remember.
Why did you launch your own design service? What kind of led to that?
So I feel like I knew I was always going to do this. I didn't know that I was going to do it this young, right? I'm they have this like 30 under 30, 40 under 40, those sort of like whatever things. And I would still classify as that 30 under 30. Like there's not too many people. I'm 29, right? It's one of those things where, I don't usually publicly share that because people have a hard time taking me serious. And it's like, no, I'm actually like, I've been doing this for almost a decade. Like I'm pretty good at it. I don't try and say that like to, puff up myself or something. I like what I do. I, continue to educate all this stuff. And so, I don't know that I was going to do it this early. But I kind of always knew I was. I mean, back when I was in high school, for some odd reason, my parents let me put 30 fish tanks in their basement, and I was shipping tropical fish all over the U.S. And so, like, awesome. I got this like, shoveling driveways, mowing lawns, all this stuff. Like I was doing
Had that entrepreneurial spirit for sure.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so, I made a lot of mistakes and I learned a lot of things when I was 15, 16 years old. And so I needed to spend time in industry working as a W-2 employee for someone else, gain that experience. And ultimately I always knew it was going to be this launching pad. I just didn't know that, I'm 2 years into full time doing this, FC Design Service stuff. I've got 2 full-time employees. I've got a bunch of contractors that work with me on a regular basis, and we're having a lot of fun. I mean, it's been cool. So,
what kind of tropical fish? Saltwater or freshwater?
Freshwater. I never did saltwater.
Discus
I wanted to,
and that kind of stuff.
Cichlids. Dude, discus are literally the coolest fish ever. But no, not discus.
Yeah.
I wasn't rich. I mean, like, and the funny part is that you, me, and like 3 people that will listen to this. Well, there's only 3 people that are going to listen to the podcast. So one person knows what a discus fish is. No, I'm kidding. That's your guys' joke. You guys, I mean, in the beginning, right, you guys were joking that 3 or 5 people are going to listen to the podcast. Now you guys are up to, what, 7 or 8?
Yeah. We have hit double digits. Yeah, don't downplay it. Like baby. Consistently double digits. So.
Yeah. So 3 people discus, right?
I know
So
we're
yeah,
kindred
so
spirits. Yeah.
Yeah. I had some African cichlids before I became a man and switched to saltwater tanks.
I didn't know you kept fish, man. That's cool. We'll have to talk more about that. That's cool.
Okay.
I like
Line drawn. How many clients are you gonna lose over that statement, Sean? You know?
Well, I had to get rid of it. I had them in my bedroom, and the sound of that filter running all night long, like I just couldn't sleep, and eventually it started driving me crazy. I couldn't. It
I
just
like that. It's like soothing, that like that moving water sound. I kind of like that.
But
Yeah,
mine
the
was
white.
like through a sump because the salt water you need like a real nice flow going through it. So it was
Protein
like this.
skimmer.
It was a separate staged filtration system. So there was like an actual electric sump that pumped into it. It was disgusting too. When you like had to stop it to do your cleaning of the bottom, you had to like siphon it, and then you'd have to be like, and then like you of course you'd get a little bit in your mouth. You'd be like, oh, it was disgusting, you know. And you're sucking up the bottom of. Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible.
I didn't know this podcast was about fish.
It is. It's about whatever you like.
When you touch the heart on something, we just run with it.
Yeah. No, so not to extend the fish conversation anymore, but man, you got me going. So for the longest time, I've really wanted to raise and breed jellyfish.
Wow.
I think it would be super cool. I did a ton of education on it, and then I realized I have no time and did not take the plunge. But one of these days, I'm gonna send you a link, and there's gonna be jellyfish for sale.
That's
gonna have
cool.
them-
We'll include because Paul, our producer, like loves it when we add a lot of like editing challenges and stuff for him.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
in post, we'll have him add a couple videos here where I went to the Omaha Zoo with my girls recently, and in the aquarium they have a couple like really sweet jellyfish exhibits that are just mind blowing because you can just stand right there with tons of
Yeah.
them moving up and down in the water
Sweet.
right in front of you, and like the fact that there's some sort of, I don't know if intelligence is even the right word, but the fact that it's even alive, that it's not just like just blank floating mass or whatever. I don't know. It's just crazy. It's a weird looking thing.
Super cool.
Thanks, Paul.
Elias, have you gotten stung in California?
I've never been stung by a jellyfish, and I've never been stung by a stingray. I try to stay out of the water. I like being on the water, but not in it, is what I like to say. But no, I mean, I've seen them for sure. Never been stung, thankfully, knock on wood. But I do think I do want to encourage Jordan to pursue jellyfish breeding. If nothing else, that would be so sweet to have in your LinkedIn profile. Experience, electrical engineer, owner, jellyfish breeder.
Yeah, it'd be like
I
that
mean-
Steven Rogers guy with the bees.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's good
Could be
with
your
it.
Maybe someday.
something to aspire to.
It's just LinkedIn. You can put it on the profile now. You can
Yeah.
still aspire to do it, you know. just,
Aspiring
you know.
jellyfish breeder. Oh man, too funny.
So like with electrical engineering and board design, the thing that's kind of like shocked me when I've looked at it is how broad it is, how many different topics you have to be pretty knowledgeable on. Like, I mean, it's going to touch in physics and calculus and chemistry and all kinds of math and science and, you know, and then, you know, if you care, you're probably going to try to make it look aesthetically nice too, on top of everything else, and
Yep.
have some sort of symmetry. And I don't know. I know some of those things maybe are purely aesthetic, but I think some of them actually do have to do with signal integrity and things like that. So you tell me. But is that a challenging or an interesting thing to you, that to really be good at circuit design, you have to have a lot of intelligence in a lot of different areas?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know that it's really all that different. Circuit board design and the need for knowledge in a bunch of different areas, right? I don't know that it's all that different from other aspects of engineering and other career paths in general. I mean, I listen to you guys talk about assembly all the time, and I mean, I don't work in assembly. I don't make stencils for a living. And so some of the things that you guys say go right over my head. And at the same time, like, I've learned a ton by listening to Rev 1.1, point 2, point 3, all the way up to 10, right? Like, and so for me, I don't know that it's that different. And at the same time, to your point, yeah, there is a lot that you have to stay up to date on. Even down to one of the big things, you can't just go, and I don't know if you guys have this in your industry, or your side of the industry, I should say, but for us in circuit board design, we have a lot of documents that are obsolete now. We have a lot of reference designs that came out from manufacturers. So pick a manufacturer, right? onsemi or ST or TI, they release these app notes, these reference designs. And if they're older than 10, 20, 30 years, they're potentially throw them in the trash. The technology's improved, the references or the design practices they advocated for are no longer acceptable for various reasons. And the problem is they live on in the internet. They'll never actually get put in a trash can. They're still out there. People are still reading them, and you could falsely follow a 20-year-old app note and think you're doing the right thing. But the manufacturer told me to do it. Well, there's a gentleman in our space. His name's Eric Bogatin, and he calls it legacy code. And he doesn't mean it like C programming and that kind of code. He means from a hardware perspective, from a circuit board design, the legacy code is old reference designs that people shouldn't use anymore. And so that's, I think, one of the really interesting things for me is watching over the last 5 and 10 years, a lot of people, me and other people in our space, having to unlearn things that we learned because it's no longer true.
At the same time, I know I've seen like one of Peter Dworek's posts where like he was talking about components he still uses, like some of his favorite old ICs that still work really well in all of his designs and everything.
Yeah.
So I know part of it is like you have to stay current on new components and new designs and all of that. Mm-hmm. But also, you don't necessarily have to rewrite the wheel if you have something that's working and is still available, because I know that can also be an issue with older components is mm-hmm. they might not still be readily available, might be harder to source, but mm-hmm. The age of the design itself isn't necessarily on its own a barrier, like, because some designs are still functioning exactly as needed with very little need to improve years later, right?
You're correct. I think a lot of those designs, those reference designs I'm talking about, those application notes, advocate for philosophies that in general aren't true anymore, is more what it is. It's not a specific part that is obsolete. There's op amps that have been around for 30 years and will continue to be around for decades more. It's not specifically a component, it's philosophies. And the problem is that you could take that old component and you could put it on the same board as 7 other newer components or a bunch and the philosophies don't hold true anymore, because once you start building up boards with new stuff, right? Even if there's old stuff on it, the new stuff, they have, like, just to use some specific examples for the other engineers that might, listen to this, right? Edge rates, like if you have a change of a signal, it goes from low to high. Well, it used to be that it happened fairly slow, right? Slow. Well, now it happens a lot faster. And so, great, you use an old chip here. Well, elsewhere on the board, you have a newer chip. And if you use the old philosophies, it's invalid because of a single part, right? And so the point is to your point, right? You could have 100 unique components on a board. You can have 1,000, components in general on a board, and all it takes is 1 or 2 little concepts that you had off, and now all of a sudden you're in an EMC lab and you're not passed.
So kind of like how if you've got 4K TV and 4K cables and everything else, but your actual signal coming in isn't 4K, doesn't matter. Or
Yeah.
if everything else is, but one of your cables doesn't support it, now you still don't have, like, you're kind of limited by your
Yeah.
weakest segment of the chain, kind
Yeah,
of,
I think
right?
I think that's a really fair analogy. I mean, at the end of the day, will it still work? Probably. Will you go to an EMC lab and you set out to pass Class B emissions, which is the emission standard that is for residential medical, so the more stringent one, right? Will you pass? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, how much do you really want to gamble? I mean, I would rather use the up-to-date practices, not use your legacy code, right? And so that's I think where our field, I mean, we're all still unlearning these practices. And so I see it all the time where someone will post new good advice, and in the comment section on LinkedIn, someone will say, oh, well, but that's not the way I do it. I do it the old way, right? And they don't realize that, like, the person posting is posting the good new advice. They're referencing the way they've been doing it for 30 years. And it's like, come on, guys, like, you were so close. You actually read the post, and then you still said, no, I want to do it the old way. It's like, anyways.
So when your average customer comes to you, where are they in their product journey? Like, they have a working product already ready to go, or they have an idea or a concept, and then you take that and say, okay, here's how we do it. Talk to us a little bit about the journey that your customers go through and where they start that journey with you.
That's interesting. So I would say, young company, right? I've only been doing this full time 2 years. We're growing. So it's not like I've got 100 customers under my belt. I probably have 20, right? And so when I take a step back and I look at them, even within those 20 customers, there's been a wide, I've had everything from, I have a schematic on a napkin. I already know what I want it to do. I already know what parts I want to use, but I just don't know how to use the electrical CAD software. So can you take my napkin drawing and make a circuit board? And then we make the circuit board, and he goes and he builds it himself, and he tests it himself, right? All we did was this one little piece of designing a circuit board, and then, he took it after that, right? We've had that. We've got 2 projects that are like 12-month full product design right now. And so we're going to do everything from start to finish: schematics, layout, firmware, mechanical, like we have the whole thing, right? And so, I would rather stay away from, I'm just a circuit board layout guy that makes a few bucks laying out a single circuit board. I would rather take on the full product design. To your point, though, I mean, where do they come to us from? I mean, sometimes it's concepts. Sometimes they know exactly what they want. Sometimes we're just doing a revision to a board that they already have, right? I've done plenty of revisions that are just, hey, I need this extra feature, or component obsolescence, right? I mean, you guys deal with that day in and day out. Well, someone had to update the source files in the ECAD tool. Someone had to generate new Gerbers because a footprint changed or whatever, and new bill of materials, et cetera. Well, like, sometimes we end up being that person, right?
Have you ever created your own product, Jordan?
No, but I've got it. I've got the path. I've charted so one of the things that I'm really fascinated by just off-the-shelf sensors in general, right? And so you can go on DigiKey or Mouser, and you can find a whole bunch of sensors. Well, I want to be on DigiKey and Mouser selling sensors. And so I've got an idea for a sensor I want to design. I've started writing it into agreements with customers where we design a sensor for them, right? And it's part of a larger subsystem, I'll say. So it's this little subsystem sensor board, and they own the rights to it. They paid for us to design it. But I've started writing in that after we're done, we get to also market and sell that sensor, and any future improvements that we make to it, any housing we put on it to make it off the shelf, whatever we do to it, they get that for free. And so I've started trying to find, this balance that I'm going to hopefully start building a portfolio of sensors that then I can call up Sean and say, hey, can you build me 100 of these, put them on the shelf, and then when I tell you to, go ahead and send them to DigiKey, and then when DigiKey runs low, then he builds me more, and eventually I'm starting to sell and peddle some sensors on our distributor websites, right? That's my goal. But no, to answer your question, Sean, no, I've not designed my own, the company has not designed their own product yet, for sale.
Yeah, I've talked to a huge EMS company earlier this week. Guy took his company from, where I'm at to 10x within 2 years. And so I was picking his brain. And one of the main things that kept him surviving, waiting till he finds the right clients, was he had his own products. He had his own, so he had his steady fill of,
Yep.
It's okay if I'm not getting orders today because I can get that stuff out. And he was explaining too, the margins we make in assembly, it's tight. It's a very global competitive market. And when you sell your own product, the margin's 100%, sometimes.
Yeah.
So it kind of opened my eyes, and I have an idea of something I want to try, but I think the hard part, and you nailed it, is for me with everything is selling it. Anybody can build it, right? It's selling your actual product. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, and to your point, the advice you got is the same thing that, like, where I'm looking at where my company is heading. I want to diversify, right? You're talking about assembly has low margins. My margins on the surface seem a lot better, right? It's just labor. But in reality, well, what I pay, my labor is expensive too, right? And so the margins aren't amazing. And I have these peaks and valleys, right? I mean, right now we're in a busy season, but earlier this year it was slower. And how do you weather that? And so I'm looking at that and saying, okay, so I'm selling some sensors, right? And then also, what would it look like for me to have a commission structure with my CMs where I bring a design to my CM and say, hey, I want this to be produced, and go ahead and add 1 or 2% margin, commission to it, and then I have some reoccurring revenue because I brought a specific design to a specific CM, and so I'm looking at all these things because I'm not always going to have, a full plate of design work. And so how do you make sure that even in those valleys that I can still feed my family, I can still feed my employees' families? Well, what you just described and is exactly what I'm looking out at the future. So we can do it together. We can chart that or see that vision for the future together.
What's crazy is I actually needed that board designed and laid out. So, and I feel like our beliefs line up. So, we'll talk more about
you
that.
have a double E on staff, man.
I do. But he is beyond buried. So I got lucky. I've had the same maintenance guy for about, I don't know, 30 years. He's 80 years old, and he's got some health issues going on, and I don't know how long he's going to be left with us. And I love the guy. He's given his soul to this company, and he's going to be leaving, and so our EE is basically next man up on that stuff, and it's a lot of tasks on certain equipment, and he's doing design, and then he's one of our best hand solderers. So, and then AOI programming, he's got the knack for thresholds, and so he's just pulled in so many areas. I'd hate to add something to his plate, and he has good ideas about how we could achieve it, but I don't know. We'll see. But Elias or Daniel, do you guys have any OEM products?
No.
But
Daniel?
Elias, now that Sean and I have talked about our vision, it's a shared vision with you as well, too, right? You're going to come up with your own super cool stencil machine that revolutionizes the industry?
The cogs are turning already. So I think Sean just kind of made me think of something here when he was talking about, or just that whole exchange, having an EE on staff, but not having enough bandwidth for some projects he's working on. Is that a spot you come in with some folks where they have in-house capabilities, but just not enough, so you kind of can act as an extension of their team?
Yeah, that's one of two buckets that we typically fall into. One is your bandwidth constrained, and so you might have a team of 10 engineers, but you need more help. And so sometimes they'll toss an entire project over the fence and say, "Hey, this is your project. We don't want to deal with it. Here's the requirements." Sometimes we get like folded into their team, and we're kind of boots on the ground alongside of them and helping. The other bucket is they don't have the expertise in house, right? They don't have that team of 10 engineers. We have a customer that they're electrochemists. They are way smarter than me. They run circles around me. They've got PhDs and this, that, and the other. Well, we're helping them design a product. They're not double E's. They're not designing products day in and day out. It's going to be really cool when it's done. I'm super excited for them. But we're just in different domains. They don't have that expertise in house, and we're, just to be honest, I mean, we're cheaper than if they go and hire double E's and try and keep them busy full time, right? I mean, that's the weird thing about, you look at our hourly rate, you look at your hourly rate, it seems high until you think about going and hiring someone, and the process of hiring is brutal. The process of training someone is brutal. You have to keep them busy, right? You don't want to lay them off after 6 months. Like, that's not okay. You have all the benefits, but when you start adding up all the numbers, it's like, actually, it's really easy for me to justify. Now, whether or not someone will believe me is a different story, but it's actually really easy for me to justify hiring for an external company to hire me, because I'm cheaper.
Sure.
And I'm faster, because I don't, it's not just me, right? I've got a lot of people, so I can get it done faster and cheaper. And I've done it time and time again, right? And so I look at it and it's like, it's actually getting easier to talk about the conversation. And as we kind of gain some more traction, I mean, we're 2 years in, right? We're 1 year further than we were last year. Like, as we gain some more traction, the conversation's getting a lot easier because the numbers make sense. Not everybody, buys in. Some people want that direct oversight of having someone in the office for, 5 days a week next to them. But for the right customer, it makes a whole lot of sense, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that you can hire an EE, but if they're a multiple rev EE, the cost in that is phenomenal. It is, and that's what I kind of like to save my EE for, stuff that's, because he's usually a one and done type of thing. Obviously there's outside factors that affect theory, right? But
Sure.
I mean, this guy is a freaking sharpshooter. So, and I've dealt with people before and it's so embarrassing as a CM when someone comes to you for a design, and before I had him, I had to use multiple people before, and it was 2 rev, 3 rev, and then when I hired him and he looked at the stuff, and just like you said, basic legacy stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I got one the other day. The guy had 90-degree traces all over the thing, just everywhere. Was like, and then he had an inductor nowhere near the IC that it was supposed to be. So this LED kept blowing out, and he didn't understand why. And he's blasting so much current and voltage to this thing. And my guy was like, "You got to move this closer, man. It's never gonna work." And like all the chip. It was like every part that needed to be near the IC was like in another section for some reason. I don't know. But that multiple rev, right?
You have that expertise in house that you were able to tell him, "Hey, you got to redesign your board."
Yeah,
that's probably humbling as an engineer when your CM tells you where your mistakes are, right?
Yeah. And well, thankfully, this guy's a little out there. He wanted us to build the board to see it fail. And I felt really cringy about doing it because I'm like, we know this doesn't work. You've tried it. And why are you going to make it? But he wanted to do it. So we did it. We actually learned from that as well, though, because it's got this, I can't say the term of what he calls it, but he calls it a old blank sensor,
Please don't.
right? That switches off when it reaches a certain temperature, right? It goes to an off state.
Okay.
And we were able to temp that out, apply to a heat sink to actually get more better than just the theory of the actual temperature range that it's going to kick in and kick out at. So
Sure.
that was pretty cool. But other than that, it was wild. But yeah, building it and then like you said, noticing those little details, and then the layout afterwards, right? It just looks better. You could just tell it was better. So
What was your question, Elias?
You were kind of talking about how in a lot of cases it can be more cost effective for somebody just to hire you rather than have that in-house double E staff. And I think kind of along that same vein of thinking leads us into the conversation about you sending some work over to Sean for contract manufacturing, and why it is that you don't have that capability within your company at this point, but having idle line time, having all of that in-house assembly doesn't make sense at this phase of the business. So that's why using a CM like Sean makes sense there.
Yeah, I mean, the four of us have talked in the past, right? Like I have a vision for someday having a small assembly capability in-house. But, Sean and I were talking BGAs the other day. I mean, I'm not going to be, even if I go and spend, 20, 25 grand on some assembly equipment and I put it in a office space down the road or something, I'm still not going to be doing BGAs, right? My goal would be that I can, right, I could build some of my own sensors to sell, right? I could build stuff for customers in low volume, relatively easy stuff, low volume. I could do quick turns faster than, I've spent an obnoxious amount of money with, there's a quick turn house that everybody knows out in California, that is common for in our space to 5-day boards, right? On your doorstep in 6 days by the time you overnight it, ship it from California. And I've spent an obnoxious amount of money with that company, this year. And so, it's one of those things where, like, if I could produce some of that in-house, like instead of me sending POs for 30 grand or 20 grand for a set of circuit boards for 10 of them or something, I could do that, right? And so I would love to have that in-house capability. I'm still always going to need Sean and other CMs to handle higher volumes, jobs that I don't have the expertise to do. And then to your point, Elias, today, the model doesn't work today. I would be buying that equipment a year or 2 years from now when it makes fiscal sense. Right now, it doesn't make any sense. I would spend 20, 25 grand on the equipment, and then I would go spend 50 grand a year in rent just to put it someplace. And now I'm 75 grand in for the first year and 50 grand every year after, and I don't have the number of jobs at this moment that it would ever make sense. And so to your point, it 100% makes sense right now to be solely dependent on a CM. And then in a future point, maybe I'm only 50% dependent upon my CMs to produce circuit boards for me. And so there's always a numbers game, and I'm on the front end of that wild journey of exploring what it looks like to be in your guys' space, right? I'm pretty far away from it right now. I just know enough to be dangerous.
that's literally exactly how we started. Was we had 3 orders from our PCB customers that would pay for our pick and place machine. That's exactly how it started. Sorry.
Yeah. So someday, Sean, it will make, I'll get the right order that it makes sense to take the plunge. But until that moment, I'm just going to keep calling you up.
Sounds like
no
hurry,
and
bud.
then even after,
It's the same logic. It's the exact same reason you exist. You were saying, sometimes it makes way more sense just to hire you directly than build that out in-house and deal with the internal costs of that. the CM is providing that exact same service for you that you're providing for other people. The amount of investment it requires to set up the line and have the knowledge and expertise and everything that goes with that. I mean, that is a whole extra set, of investment and labor and all of that attached to that. So it's not a small decision to do that. So if you can just do what you're good at and pay somebody else to do what they're good at, for that model is going to make sense for a long time. I know my bosses aren't going to be like thrilled to hear it, but there was a time where I actually talked to a prospective customer that wanted to do things really fast and kind of wanted to do things in a situation where it's kind of like what you're describing. They're always going to be in a situation where their needs are extremely expensive. And I kind of told them, like, you really might be best served to figure out how to do this in-house. If you could build your own small volume runs, lighter, quicker, without, having to involve someone else, like, you might be able to get your products to market way faster and cheaper. It's just, there's a different solution for everyone, right?
Yeah. And to your point, Daniel, I mean, I've had that conversation from like my design services angle. I've had that conversation with customers too. I'm not afraid to tell someone, hey, you have enough work here. If you really want to, you could go hire a double E and you would be able to keep them busy. And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, no, we're debating that, and I don't mind having those conversations, right? To your point, like, okay, is it what's best for your company? Maybe not, but is it what's best for your customer? Possibly. And I care more about the customer than I care about, the bottom line, making money and this, that, and the other. And so I've told customers plenty of times, yeah, you might consider going and hiring a double E because this is a lot, and you could hire us, but you might actually save money because of how much work you have if you hire another person. So there's definitely there's a balancing act there.
If you put their needs in front of your own, right? Like, even if you put their needs in front of your own, even when that comes at a cost to you, that builds trust. And even if that doesn't result in that person using you for that project, I'm a firm believer if, in like that kind, you just act the right way all the time, regardless of if there's anything to be gained from it, right?
Yeah.
And in the long run, that pays off. People respect that. They remember it, in the long run, that has a lot more value than trying to, pull something over fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious, have you ever designed any HDI boards, and what was your opinion? Have you looked into Flux AI, or what's your opinion on any of the AI? Daniel was out at PCB West, and I seen some posts where they were saying they think in 7 years a lot of layout might be AI generated.
So do you guys follow Zach Peterson or Zachariah Peterson on? So he's posted a
From
number of
Altium.
videos. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's posted a number of like reviews of AI schematic and layout companies, and his posture at the present moment is that it's novel, it could shorten, time to market, reduce labor hours, all these things, but it's not really there yet. And I might be oversimplifying. I don't want to put words in his mouth, right? I'm doing this from memory, but what the video reviews he's done, I mean, it seems pretty cool, and it seems like even though it might not be there yet, like it'll get there. And so, I mean, it's an interesting conversation around, board layout and stuff, and you could look at every other industry as well, right? There's an interesting conversation to be had on how is AI going to influence our jobs 5 and 10 and 15 years from now? Short answer is I don't know how it'll impact us as layout people. I mean, we're already seeing with the LLM, stuff with all our firmware, software. I mean, it's common for me to go on ChatGPT and say, hey, what is this, such and such, right? As it relates to firmware development. And so It's coming. It's just a matter of how big of a change, and I don't really know. I mean, we'll adapt as we go, right? It's all of us can do.
Yeah, you're still going to need an expert to read it. So I have it do a lot of repeating code for me on PHP, Java, and HTML. And it prints out stuff that I know is not going to work. And,
Yeah.
I'll have to redefine a table, or I'll have to, say this is never going to SQL correctly because this won't match to that, and the output here is not correct, or
Yeah.
the formulas. But I mean, the improvement I've seen from 3 to 3.5, then to 4.0, and that 4.0i is just night and day, and
Yeah.
to think of 7 years from now, like they were saying at PCB West, it's kind of wild, man. It's a wild time.
It is. It's I mean, this is like, everybody looks back 20 years ago, right? And advent of social media, and you can keep going, 90s with, .com boom and all that. I mean, like, we have these defining periods in history, and right now we're in the middle of this AI revolution, and nobody knows how it's gonna play out,
Yeah, if you've
right?
been to
Well,
any trade shows in the last year, we're in the middle of the AI boom. It's like all anyone talks about. It's
yeah,
all over everyone's signage. It's a part
yeah,
of all of their pamphlets and leaflets. It's like, even if they don't have anything.
yeah. I mean, we have projects that we're working on right now that have AI, ML, machine learning um, aspects to them. I mean, we're learning. We're in the trenches too, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm curious to see where it all ends. That's for sure.
7 years we'll have you on, and we'll look back at this moment and say one of two things, right? Like, wow, we had no clue what was really coming, or what were we thinking? Like, this could
Sean,
possibly do that.
does your AOI or SPI use AI to help detect, to sort through, like your AOI? Does it sort through false calls and all that on its own, or like the SPI, or does it not really use AI?
I mean, I don't know if I'd call it artificial intelligence, because it's been programmed in there, right? Like, I kind of look at as intelligence as like how I just described how when you print out some page code, that if you really were intelligent about it, you would put the right code that belongs in there, right? So someone had a program in there, like the AOI for the Omron has all of these IPC violations in it. It's basically a 610A J standard inspector right in front of you, right? And you can
Hmm.
define the tolerance of what it's going to pass and what it's going to not pass. And the SPI has the all of this data in there about volume, height, and how it landed on the pad, and X and Y, and everything you could possibly think
So
of.
you don't have anything that is a gray area that requires a operator to make a judgment call?
100%. They all do. But what I would define as AI is the ability of the Omron to literally shift the PCB data back to the pick and play, or the printer, and then adjust the offsets and adjust pressure, adjust stuff like that, right? So that's
Sure.
taking the intelligence from one machine, transferring it to another, which then affects the rest of the production. That to me, I would call artificial intelligence, right? There's no human doing that. It's just sending the data that I received from one to the other, and adjusting on the fly. So that's what I would define that part as.
So let me ask a follow up on that. So from like do you have a if I can reject or accept this, and that is a feedback loop where it looks and says, okay, he rejected it for this reason, and you're training like the machine learning side of it where it's now going to, because to your
Because
point,
that's
right?
some of them do that. That's my point.
Yeah.
Is some of them actually do that. Some of them over time literally learn what your judgment call would be, and eventually, when you've built up enough judgment calls, you're no longer needed, because it can actually make it. It's obviously going to do everything that's an obvious violation or an obvious pass, but you're going to be pointing at, like, you're going to get to this point where you're right on the edge, right? Where it's not going to be an obvious, the machine will not be able to tell on its own whether it's a clear pass or clear fail. And in those moments, it will be able to then draw back on, well, when I've been right on the line before and it looks similar to this, what was the judgment call? Like, and it uses that and will get to the point where once it reaches a certain level of confidence, now you don't have to make those calls either. It actually will make even those fine judgment calls for you the same way you would.
Wow.
Yeah.
Looks like
Yeah.
I bought the wrong machine. I don't know.
No, that's not what I'm saying. No, I'm saying I'm actually I'm going to their demo booth. I just found out today,
Go ahead, plug
Tuesday.
'em.
I'll go to their.
Who is it? I want to know now.
I'm wrong. I'm saying you're.
Oh,
your
their
people.
their new model.
Their demo. I'm going to their demo room on Tuesday to see a bunch of cool stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if they've got AI to it or not. Other brands I've looked at do. So I'm kind of assuming that their newest stuff will, but just an assumption at this point. But
I can.
those demo labs of new equipment, that's my happy place. I love going to those places and seeing all this brand new equipment, cutting edge, state of the art stuff. Like, it's pretty fun.
I
Big
can
boys,
program
Toys
it
R
on
Us.
every machine on my shop floor except for the AOI. It's and the SBI can I can run it, and I can run the AOI as long as it's green. As long as it passes through. The second there's a false call or something like that, I need someone else's eyes because I just don't
You
want to
need
do
an
it.
adult.
Yeah. Please the adults. Can they come to the room? But yeah. So
can I ask an AOI question to
go
you?
ahead.
Because you're talking about you can't program it, you can't run it. There's a shop that is local to me. They're small, and they don't use their AOI. They have an AOI, but it's not in line. And so they have to, walk the board over to it. They had to program it, right? They don't use it for most jobs because they're so confident in their process, their SMT and through-hole process, that they can just inspect it, and they're a small shop, right? And so for them, they can just look at it and have more confidence than spending the time programming the AOI. And so I asked them, I said, hey, well, just ballpark it for me. If I told you you had to use AOI, even though you don't want to, you had to. Now you have to go and program it this. How much extra does it add to the board cost? And we were just using some round numbers. He said, well, probably like $5 a board. And that was in low quantity. So let's say it's 100 boards that I'm building or something, right? I mean, do you feel like there's any? I mean, every board shop up until that point that I've ever visited relies heavily on AOI. I mean, is there any? He has it. They have it. They don't use it. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't want to sound like a jerk because I'm really not a person, but I was one day watching the operator. They took there's a pass-through mode on the SPI, and the SPI kept flagging, right? So instead of figuring out why, stopping the process and adjusting, they just put it through pass-through mode. And then there was small prototype runs where it was 5 pieces, 10 pieces, and they were like, well, it's, and I have certified trainer in J Standard and IPCA 610 that's been doing this stuff for 30 years on staff, and I call her the MOI, right? The Mary Optical Inspection. She was what I had before the AOI. And, there was like 5 pieces, and they didn't want to bother my engineer on programming the AOI and just for 5 pieces, and so they would just visual inspect. And this is probably the meanest thing I ever said to my employees, but I said, either one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to use these machines on every single job. I'm going to hire people who use them, or I'm going to sell the equipment. So you guys take your pick. And I didn't know that they were going to take it so literal, because there's sometimes where it's like a one-piece job, and then they're like, well, we got to make a program for it. I'm like, come on, guys, we can.
They're terrified for their livelihood, Sean.
Yeah, and I'm not that guy, but I was like, and I guess probably because I don't lay the hammer down often, that they kind of, but I've seen this, I'm paying the loans on this equipment, and it's expensive, right? To buy this stuff. I mean, you're talking about 25 grand to start up a shop, but you're talking 6 figures for the AOI and SPI I got, right? So I'm seeing this equipment acting as a conveyor, and I must have had a bad day or something, and I was like, listen, you either get this thing to work, or I'm going to get people who work it, right? So, thankfully we're doing that, and but yeah, for me, as a person who
That after the birth of your second?
probably no, first, it was after my first. So, for me, the person that
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if pretty soon you start walking around your shop in like a king outfit or something.
dude, why you got to bring that up?
Oh, there will be a
I mean,
graphic now.
Halloween is right around the corner.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
yeah.
Paul will throw that up on the screen for this episode, the picture of Sean dressed as a king.
All right, well, don't say the
Audience will
reason. You
enjoy
can't
that.
say the reason why. You can't say the reason why yet. That's top secret till.
So on the question, the AOI question, Jordan, I've seen both sides. So like when we were actually considering buying Europlacer equipment, one of the shops I went to had a Europlacer set. Like the salesman took me to another shop that had Europlacer equipment set up. They were an OEM doing their own product, so they did like 3 product lines. Period. They knew their product back and forth. Like they never changed setup. They're the way Europlaces work, they have so many feeders on them. These people's designs didn't require them to ever change a setup when they went between their 3 different jobs. So they just kept all their parts loaded on the machine all the time, never changed a thing, just whatever job they were running, they just hit the button and pressed go. They'd done it so many times. They got to the point where, and their AOI, same situation, not in line. So running it all through the AOI would require a whole extra set of hours and a manual operation kind of deal of loading it and unloading it. And so they got to the point where the percentage of fallout was just so ridiculously low, it just didn't make any more sense. Whatever percentage of fallout was going to be so within the acceptable frame that there's literally no point for them to inspect that percentage of good boards anymore. Yeah. But for a situation like us where you're running different product all the time, I mean, you just got to do it. And I don't know how everyone else's situation is, but like once I'm done programming the job for our pick and place, I'm almost done programming it for the AOI also. I mean, I already have all the data that the AOI needs. Transfer it all. It already has our part number, the rotation, the location of every part and all that. And the only thing that really takes very much programming time once it gets to the AOI is if there's any new parts, if there's any brand new parts on the job, that have never been used before, never been programmed, a package it doesn't recognize or whatever.
Sure.
I mean, otherwise, it's pretty fast.
I mean, maybe they had an old unit or something. I don't know. He didn't like it. They don't use it much unless it's requested, and when a customer requests it, they charge extra money for it. So I just thought it was interesting. It's also, I mean, I really like the people that own the shop. I've never bought from them because they're just too expensive, and so it's just a really interesting conversation. I really like them. I had never heard that before. It was like, what do you mean you don't use your AOI?
Elias, this might be a cool time for you to talk about the new piece of equipment you're thinking about buying that's kind of got the AOI and the engraver built into it.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of along the same front with stencils, we're inspecting them for aperture presence. I was just having a conversation with my production lead today about a new piece of equipment that we're looking to add that just kind of does what we currently do faster and better, and also has some other functionality with it as well. But essentially, we're scanning the stencil to be sure that all the apertures that should be there are there, and nothing extra is there. And I was asking him, like, how many defects are you detecting? So he pulled a log up, and like in the last 2 months we've had 2. So it's kind of along that same line of running things through the AOI without having any poor results. But those 2 would have been too many if they would have made it out of the shop, right? So go ahead.
So I have a follow-up on that.
Yep.
So as the so the question I have, and the question that maybe someone listening to the podcast would have, is you had 2 defects out of how many stencils? I mean, I actually don't know the answer to this. How many stencils are you putting through your shop on a monthly basis?
Even more impressive, how many aperture? 2 defects,
Yeah.
meaning 2 individual apertures total, 2 individual apertures, right?
Yeah, 2 individual apertures. And like when Daniel was in my shop last week without Sean, we were kind of looking at this.
Uh,
Sorry, Bub.
on Rev 1.10, Sean seemed really salty that he wasn't there.
We haven't stopped.
He hasn't gotten over it yet, buddy.
We were looking at some orders that were in the production queue, and Daniel's jaw dropped when I showed him some of the aperture counts on some stencils, like 60,000 apertures, I think was one that we pulled off. So in that 2-month time span, suffice it to say that multiple millions of apertures would have been processed. And out of that, there was 2 instances where there was a defect that was detected. So the equipment's
Which counts
extremely
as a
reliable.
0 defect process, by the way. That
Even by the most
super
stringent of
qualifies.
standards, right? So, to answer your question, a lot of stencils in that time period, thousands and millions of apertures, multiple millions of apertures. So it's a very stable process. Not a lot can go wrong in terms of causing an aperture defect. The most common one we see is with fiducials on very thin foil. That's the most sensitive area.
Probably more common than that even. It would be a CAD error. Yeah.
Certainly. And yes, if there is something that is there that shouldn't be there, or something missing that should be there, it almost typically happens in the CAD process, or it was something that was wrong with the files that were received initially. I can't tell you how many times we'll be reviewing like a top copper layer in comparison to the paste. That's like, well, don't you want that IC? And it's in the top copper, but it's not on the paste file. So we try to overlay and compare layers to find any instances that are missing from the paste file. And then there are instances where you could go ahead.
I'm going to thank you, for all electrical engineers everywhere, for reviewing that, because at some point I will be that guy that makes that error, and I hope that you catch it. So, I mean, I don't, to my knowledge, I've never made that error. But, I mean, for all I know, maybe I made the error once 5 years ago or something, and a shop like yours caught it and didn't even tell me. So, and so anyways, for what it's worth, that's super cool that you take that extra time to make sure that the guy that did the CAD work didn't shoot himself in the foot, and you're going to catch it. So
yeah, and that's why it's a best practice. Send your stencil manufacturer all of your files that you have. Don't just split out the paste and send that. Send the full stack up. Whether it's me or any other stencil supplier, give them everything you got, because it's just another set of eyes that are going to be looking, and it only helps. It never hurts.
So that's an interesting one, because as a double E, I have never ever once talked with, well, prior to meeting you, a stencil supplier. And so I've always, sent it to the assembly house. I don't get to talk to the bare board house. I don't get to talk to the stencil supplier. I send it to the assembly house, and they take care of it. And so, I mean, to your point, make sure you send all your Gerbers or all your CAD files, all your outputs to your stencil supplier. I don't know. Sean, did you? I don't know.
No, actually, I didn't. And that was for let's just say the eyes in the sky, right? They don't like, not everything can be sent to everybody, right? So no, I did not. They received a modified version in-house. It actually bit me in the butt on that one, because there was 4 fiducials each board, 2 up, so there's 8 fiducials on the board. And my guy, we like to do 3 fiducials on the stencil, so that way they can't load it in the wrong way, right? Compared to the board. So my buddy over there got 3 fiducials, and the squeegee was not doing the best over one. It was kind of leaving a little bit of deposit. So when I went to realign, was picking up this granule stuff and then flagging it as the wrong. And then there were some components next to it that was picking up falsely as the actual fiducial that I had taught to. So if I would have added another one on there, that would have been okay. And for the most part though, when we receive from me, I will send you all the files going forward, because I never even thought about the other couple episodes you talked about, like, I want to see the silk on the bottom layer, and I'm like, what is he?
Yep.
Do you want me to send the schematic too, so you can go sell it to your buddy in China? You know?
I'm surprised you didn't, like, I need it's just kind of like how frequently when I'm setting up a job on the pick and place, I have to look at the assembly drawing. Like I need a good detailed assembly drawing, or that can kind of actually supersede the silk, because the silk can a lot of times get, depending on how, like where the vias are, how close all the pads are packed together and everything. I mean, sometimes things don't show up exactly as they should. Sometimes where they intended the polarity marker to be ends up getting covered by something else, and now you don't even see it on the silk anymore. And so, like, those drawings, a lot of times, if you've got like a line of like 12 reference designators in a row next to just a whole bunch of pads, and you're not even 100% sure what's supposed to be what, those drawings like help a ton. So I'd kind of assume it'd be a kind of a similar thing. Getting all the layers just for the stencil guy is gonna remove any ambiguity, any questions where you're like, I don't know, is this part of it or not? And then you look at the other layer and you're like, oh no, that makes sense now.
Yeah. Where is this dot really located? And I was ignorant to the fact of what actually goes through in a stencil manufacturing process, right? Like, as an outsider, you're like, just cut the metal, dude. Come on, how hard can this be? But there's a lot that
I
goes.
recommend going sometime, Sean. Really, you ought to go to a stencil manufacturer sometime and see the whole process from start to finish. Cause,
yeah,
like,
there's a
it's
beautiful
really insightful.
There's a beautiful one in Chicago that I might go see. Deliver the best stuff in the world.
Do they have ube cheesecake there?
That's a good question.
I want to make this point because it's important about, like, the bottom silk. Why would
Careful.
it be a swamp? No, it was important because it made me open my eyes to, okay, and I literally had this problem on my programming this job. My operator came to me and said, hey, this weird, it's not lining up on the machine. And I said, well, when you programmed it, did you mirror the image, right? Because they sent them the CAD file. The bottom side needs to be mirrored, right? And that's what Elias is looking for too. He wants to make sure that the text is mirrored so that way it lines up on the bottom. And I never even thought of that because I lived in the world of ignorance of, like, they're just cutting metal. How hard can it be, right? I send the plot and then he does it, but those little extra steps, and even like Daniel's saying, checking polarity, it's so much easier to see on the actual Gerber file versus the actual board, right?
Yeah, I was thinking when I was saying send everything you've got, some folks would even send a bomb sometimes, and I used to have the attitude of like, well, I don't need this, right? But kind of working with you two guys has changed my outlook on that a little bit, because there's been times where we see a component that we haven't seen before, or something is just out of the ordinary, and we've taken a deep dive into the component data sheet, looked at the recommended soldering footprint there, and that's something my attitude's changed on. I think sometimes it is good to know what components are going to be on there, and looking at it more than just the shapes on the Gerber file, but what is the component. So just
those SOD 523s, if you don't know that's the component that goes there and you're just looking at that decode compared to everything else, you're probably just going to do a 10% reduction, rounded corners, and call it good, or maybe a home plate or whatever. But like, either way, the strategy that would be standard just based on the appearance alone is going to leave you with like twice as much paste as what the actual recommended strategy is on that component. So, or if you have a MeLF, there's a specific strategy applied to a MeLF. If you have, I mean, there's actually quite a few instances where the pad itself is not going to give away some useful information that could be needed for the best or optimal design.
Sure. The paste layer and the silk screen only tell you so much. You can identify the typical or more basic components, but there's certainly some oddballs out there that you don't see all the time or are just impossible to differentiate from a different component type just based off the reference designator and the openings on the paste.
That conversation, Daniel, about those specific components reminded me of a design. It was like 6 or 7, 5 years ago. I don't know. It was it was a while ago, and I was working as a W-2, for designing boards and stuff for a company that I worked for, and there was a ESD, there's a TVS diode, to protect against ESD. A TVS diode that I designed into a board. It was a TI part, and it was it was an 0402 package size. If you can picture, like, it was the size of an 0402 resistor or capacitor, but it was a leadless part in the sense that underneath this TVS diode, your resistors, your capacitors have the caps on the ends, or the terminations on the end, and then you get the solder fillet down. Well, this is like a leadless part, a 2-pin leadless part, and I just realized, based on this conversation, if Elias had known, Elias didn't get to make this stencil, right? 99% chance, but that he didn't make it. But say, for argument's sake, he knew what this part was, it wouldn't have got overpasted. That's exactly when the boards came off. The part was floating up and
Swimming.
like on its side and stuff. It had too much paste on it, and at the time I didn't realize, and I didn't care. But as I look back, or like even if I did it now, oh man, I would not be happy about that. Like, it was not done well, and all it would have taken was to realize that this isn't actually an 0402 component. It's a leadless TVS diode that needed a lot less paste under it.
Yeah, it just has that little sliver underneath it for a lead, right? Like, it's just barely any surface.
It was an oddball part. I kind of regret using it in hindsight, but even if I thought it was the best idea ever to use that part, the stencil just needed to be different. So that's a good call out. I didn't realize it until this moment that is exactly what happened.
We say it almost every cast, but it just rings true every conversation we have. But that was kind of the founding idea of doing this whole thing, is getting multiple disciplines communicating and learning these lessons that you can only learn by talking to people upstream and downstream of your process. So it just, it's almost cliche to say at this point because we say it every time, but every single show it rings true.
Yeah.
I'll second that. When you guys had, was his name Mike Conrad, the wash guy? Holy smokes, that was a good. I had no idea.
Bright.
Yeah.
I went back the next day and changed notes on drawings that I was like, I need to call out the wash different. Like, this is because I think I had how did I word it? I was talking about how my flux, I wanted water soluble flux, because in my mind, if it's water soluble flux, and if I'm touching up a board, well, I can have DI, RODI water, distilled water. I could get some water and I could touch up a board myself as long as it's, aqueous flux. Well, he's talking about how there's all sorts of oils and stuff that will be on these boards, and you want a chemical wash. You don't want just a water wash. You want a chemical wash. And that was the first time I had ever heard. I was like, oh man, I've been talking about this wrong. I I shouldn't have called it out that way on my notes. And so it's not that way anymore. And it was because of that podcast episode. And so now I'm
That's
a firm
awesome.
believer, and I've
Yeah.
started sharing with other people. It's like, no, you want a chemical wash. Those chemicals, they're going to put them on your board, and they're going to keep reusing those chemicals, and they're gross, but it's actually what you want. And then they're going to wash it all away with 7 different DI flushes, rinses on this board, 5, 6, 7 rinses. They're going to wash away all that chemical. What you're going to be left with is this beautiful board that's not going to corrode and doesn't have any junk on it.
I do 13 rinses per cycle.
Holy smokes, dude.
It's a long time.
That is a lot.
Daniel, you're doing 14, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's just as a standard, just because basically what any average shop would do.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
make sure I one-up them. Yeah. No, that's great. Jordan, I just want to say thank you from all of us for sure for being a guest on this and being so gracious with your time and sharing so much with us. It's been super enlightening and enjoyable for all of us. Before you go, we like to give everyone an opportunity to kind of promote their service before we let them go, because we're grateful to have your time here. So you can use this audience, this platform to reach the 7 people and tell them what you do. And we're just that gracious. So thank you again, and go ahead, promote FC however you like to.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate all you guys. This was super fun. I've really enjoyed LinkedIn and getting to know more people, and I'm grateful that you guys have allowed me in. You guys have made this little circle, this little pocket of people on LinkedIn, and I'm glad that we all get to chime in on each other's posts and learn from each other. And so it's made me a better designer, and so for that I'm grateful. Again, just, FC Design Services, we circuit boards, firmware, mechanical, full product design. We're having a lot of fun doing it. We're growing. And, so yeah, for anybody that's listening, check us out, and we'd be grateful. And if you decide to have us design a board for you, then Sean will produce it for us. Sorry, Daniel. It's nothing against, you're just a little farther away.
That's okay.
And
There's plenty of work out there for everyone.
Yeah, and that you're right. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out, Elias. Sean, I'm gonna buy it from you, and Sean, you're gonna go to Elias for the stencil.
yeah.
Sounds like a directive to me.
And
Sometimes he does.
The real reason is he's gonna make me wear an Ohio State jersey to the Michigan football stadium when they play Ohio State.
I just want the 7 people listening to this to know that Sean and I, prior to this moment, have never talked about Ohio State or Michigan.
That is true.
Football. And so this is coming from left field. I don't know who this guy is.
It always is. It always is with a conversation with me.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys. This was a lot of fun.
You bet. Thanks again. Thanks to our audience for sticking with us, and hopefully you will be with us again for Rev 1.12. Thank you very much.